Tonight's file was recovered from a dead radio frequency, a relay channel that had carried nothing but static for 30 years, assigned, according to its own logbook, to a station that appears in no registry we can reach. The relay itself sat in a corner of the sky our survey maps no longer bother to update. There is no way of knowing how far its signal travelled to reach us. Only this. The voice it carried was old before any of us were born. Then one night the static parted, and for most of that night a voice told a story. This story. It did not pause once in all those hours. It did not correct itself, as if it were reading or remembering. Whether the one who told it is still out there, whether anyone is, the archive cannot say. The archive does not ask how. The archive keeps what it is given. The label reads, "The Echo Layer." We begin. 900 kilometers beneath Isla Marsh's boots, the planet was singing. That is not a metaphor. She was hanging from a winch cable on the outer hull of Station Halcyon 9, her helmet pressed against a titanium spar, and through the metal she felt it, a vibration climbing into her glove, into her arm, like a pulse that wasn't hers. A deep, rhythmic droning. It rose from far below, under the tiers of orange cloud that wrapped the gas giant Barrow. The station's old-timers called it the Deep's Carol. Isla called it something else. She called it the place where Abel died, the place that, in 19 years, no one had ever come back from. She tightened her grip on the torque wrench and gave the nut on the heat exchange line another quarter turn. Below her, the clouds rolled in spirals 1,000 kilometers wide, their edges lit by soundless lightning. Above her hung the black sky and the station. A scratched, patched ring kept alive with weld seams and stubbornness, turning like a tired clock. "Marsh," said a voice in her helmet. "Finish up out there and come in. We have a problem." "I always have a problem, Saba. That's what you pay me for." "I haven't paid you in 3 months. Come in." Something in the administrator's voice made Isla stop mid-turn. Sabah Idris never hurried. She would announce a decompression at the same deliberate pace. Now her voice trembled at the edges like a wire drawn too tight. Isla looked up toward the station's ring, and only then did she see it. From Section C, a thin thread of frozen vapor was escaping. White, straight, silent, like a wisp of smoke from a house that doesn't yet know it's burning. Section C housed the lung, the great atmospheric processor that drank hydrogen from Barrow and turned it into air, into water, into life for the 1,200 people aboard. "Coming in," Isla said, and her fingers closed around the cable harder than she'd meant them to. The command room smelled of burnt coffee and fear. Isla walked in with her helmet under her arm and her hair plastered to her temples. Gathered around the table was everything Halcyon 9 had that mattered. Sabah, whose wrinkles had deepened overnight. Chief Engineer Wes Drummond, his grease-blackened hands spread over a holographic projection, and Dr. Amar, who only came to meetings when someone was about to die. The projection showed the lung, a sphere of piping and reaction chambers the size of a cathedral. Its heart glowed red. "The catalytic lattice," Wes said without preamble. "It's crystallized, 90 years of service on a 40-year design. It held as long as it held." "So we patch it," Isla said. "We patch everything. We've been patching all our lives." "You don't patch this." Wes rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. "The lattice is a monocrystalline mesh of doped iridium, grown in a factory in zero gravity over 2 years, Without it, the lung swallows raw hydrogen and chokes. And with the lattice dead, he gestured at the projection. We have air for 11 days. 12 if we shut down the greenhouses. 13 if we shut down something else too. But I won't say what. Not with Amma in the room. The silence that followed had weight. Isla felt it settle on her shoulders. The consortium, someone said from the back of the room. Helike keeps spare lattices on every freighter. Sabah shook her head, slowly. I spoke with Helike an hour ago. Her jaw was tight. They're sending the Herald. It arrives in 60 hours, not with a lattice, with evacuation orders. In their registries, this station is listed as a non-recoverable asset. They take our people. They split them up on 10-year labour contracts, whoever lands wherever, and they let the ring fall into Barrow. As far as they're concerned, Halcyon 9 died this morning. We haven't been informed yet. Labour contracts, Dr. Amma repeated quietly. Call it by its name, Saba. Indenture, with paperwork. No one contradicted her. Isla stared at the hologram of the lung pulsing red, and she thought absurdly of the greenhouses on Deck F, of the smell of ripe tomatoes that sometimes slipped through the ventilation, of the children who had grown up on the station, children who had never seen a blue sky but knew by heart every colour of the clouds of Barrow. 11 days. There is a lattice, she said. She hadn't meant to say it, and now the words hung in the middle of the room, and everyone was staring at them. The Theodora, Isla went on, because there was no way back now. The cargo ship that went down 20 years ago. She was carrying an entire lung, disassembled, to the shipyard at Barrow 2. The lattice was in Hold 3, in a pressurized container, freshly grown. Iridium doesn't rust. It doesn't age. If it survived the impact, it's down there right now. Down there, Wes said, with the gentleness you use on someone raving with fever, means inside the echo layer, 900 kilometers deep, 80 bars of pressure, 600 knot winds above and below. Nobody goes down into the echo, Isla. You, of all people, know why. She knew. Oh, how she knew. She knew it with her skin, with the muscles of her back, with that place in her chest that had never healed. Abel Barlow. The man who had taught her to weld, to fly and to curse in 3 languages. The man who had been more of a father to her than anyone. 19 years ago, 1 year after the Theodora sank, Abel had gone down into the Echo after the wreck. And Isla, 20 years old, had stayed up top at the winch, her hand on the recovery lever. And when the storm came in faster than the chart said it would, when Abel's voice screamed something over the radio, something the static tore to shreds, Isla had frozen. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. A lifetime. When she finally pulled the lever, the cable came up empty. Its unclipped carabiner swung at the end of it like a question mark. For 19 years she had not gone below the ammonia cloud deck. She repaired the station from the outside in clean, predictable vacuum, where nothing howls and nothing calls your name. I know why, Isla said, and I know I'm the only pilot on this station who has ever been below the 100-kilometer line, the only one who can still read a pressure chart, the only one with a working abyssal tug in dock. The Skylark is 60 years old, Wes said. So am I some mornings. We're both holding up fine. Sabah looked at her for a long time. In the administrator's eyes, Isla saw the cold arithmetic, the odds, the risks, the price, and underneath it all, something that looked like prayer. If you don't come back, Sabah said, we also lose the 11 days. 11 days we could have used to negotiate something less ugly with Helik. And if I do come back, We don't negotiate anything with anyone. She picked her helmet up off the table. I leave in 4 hours. Wes, I want the Theodora's docking manifest, and everything that's left of the telemetry from... She stopped, swallowed. Everything that's left of the telemetry from the last descent. She walked out of the room before anyone could see her hands shaking. Dock 4 smelled of hydraulic oil and thyme. The Skylark sat in her mooring chains like an old, obstinate bird. An abyssal tug with a round belly and a double hull of ceramic composite, scarred by 1,000 descents, from the days when Halcyon 9 still skimmed helium-3 from the upper layers. Isla climbed in through the ventral hatch and powered up the main bus. Somewhere in the ship's guts, something woke with a sigh of fans. 61 days, said a woman's voice from the deck speakers. Warm and husky. That's how long since your last visit. I was starting to think you'd found yourself another tug. Hello, Wren. Hello, Isla Marsh. The artificial intelligence paused for exactly long enough to seem thoughtful. You're loading me a flight plan with a destination 900 kilometers down, the Echo Corridor, the coordinates of the wreck of the Theodora. So, either you've mistyped 3 zeros, or something terrible has happened. The lung is dead. The lattice on the Theodora is the only chance. The fans changed pitch, just barely. Wren had once been the brain of an entire mining platform, until the consortium declared her morally obsolete and sold her off by the kilogram. Abel had bought her. He'd moved her into the Skylark and left her to Isla, along with the ship, the debts, and a drawer's worth of weather proverbs that Wren collected with a passion no one could explain in a machine. Morning clouds won't feed you come evening, Wren said. What's that supposed to mean? No idea, but it seemed suitably grim. I've run the diagnostics. The hull is good to 90 bars. In theory. The main winch pulls 40 tons. Ballast is full. What I don't have, Isla, is the deep antenna. Wes sold it 2 years ago for parts. Below 300 kilometers, we lose the station. It will be just the 2 of us and the planet. We've been just the 2 of us and the planet before. We've been 3 before, Wren said. Gently. Isla ran her palm over the back of the pilot's seat. On the left armrest, under the worn lacquer, was the burn mark from Abel's cigarettes, from the days when people smoked aboard and no one dared say a word to him. 19 years. And the mark was still there. Materials remember, Abel had told her once. That's why I love them more than people. People forget even when they don't want to. Materials forgive nothing. Wren, Isla said. One more thing. When we reach the wreck, before we touch anything, you transmit a salvage claim on the registry frequency, full code, timestamp, the whole liturgy. Below 300 kilometers, I have nothing to transmit with. Which is why you transmit it before 300, an anticipatory claim on coordinates. It's an old loophole in Salvor's law. Whoever declares position and intent first gets 90 hours of priority. Abel taught me that one. He used to say paperwork wins more battles than guns. Abel also used to say regulations are like ice clouds. Beautiful, from a distance. Wren paused. The claim is drafted. Isla, have you slept in the past 30 hours? I'll sleep on the way up. That's what he used to say too. Isla didn't answer. She cinched the seat straps. She put on her helmet. Through the viewport she watched the dock gates open with a shriek of splitting ice. Below her, Barrow filled the sky. A sea of orange and copper cloud rippling, lit from within by lightning that beat like buried hearts. Somewhere beneath all those layers slept the Theodora, and deeper than the Theodora slept the other thing, the thing Isla never spoke of, the echo layer itself, the miracle of Barrow and its curse, the place where the planet kept its memory. "Ballast free," she said, taking her down. The Skylark slipped her chains and fell into the light. The first 100 kilometers were almost beautiful. The ship cut through the ammonia cloud deck, blinding white, then cream, then the yellow of old honey. The sunlight thinned by degrees, sifted through ever thicker layers until it was no more than a diffuse suspicion, like the memory of a summer day. At 200 kilometers, the sky overhead vanished. There was no more up, there was only inside. An ocean of gas on every side, coppery, then dark red, then the color of spilled wine, veined with currents that Isla read off the pressure displays like sheet music. "Crosswind, 200 knots, Wren reported. "Steady. That's just the planet breathing. Hull at 18 bars. All the joints are keeping quiet." "When they start talking, you tell me." "When they start talking, you'll hear them yourself." At 300 kilometers, Wren transmitted the salvage claim. 3 short bursts of data, climbing toward the orbital relays like pigeons released from a cellar. And then the world above closed for good. No station, no voices, only the drone of the engines, the thin whine of the gyros, and clearer as they went down that sound. The carol, the deep rhythmic droning that resembled nothing else in the universe, because nothing else in the universe was the echo layer. Isla listened to it swell, and her palms went damp inside her gloves. No one knew exactly how it worked. Only this much was known. At a depth of 800 kilometers, the pressure and chemistry of Barrow gave birth to a layer of liquid metallic hydrogen, tens of kilometers thick, a planetary superconductor, a sheet of currents without resistance, where any electromagnetic field, once it entered, never died. It circulated, it kept. Every storm of the past million years had left its signature there, every radio transmission of every ship that had ever passed through the system, every scream. And the layer didn't only keep. The layer played back, the currents braided and unbraided, and sometimes, by who knows what resonance, an old fragment rose to the surface of the sheet and spilled back into the ether, as clear as on its first day. The physicists called it ferrohydrodynamic memory. The pilots called it something else. The pilots said that under the clouds of Barrow, no word ever dies. That was why nobody went down. Not just the pressure, not the winds or the discharges, but because down in the echo, your ship's radio would sooner or later speak in the voices of the dead. The first voice came at 470 kilometers. A crackle in the speakers. Then, as clear as if it were transmitting from a meter away, a man's voice. Cheerful, with a low-orbit accent. "Confirming dock at Barrow 2, thanks for the escort. This is the Northern Star out." The Northern Star had been broken up for scrap 30 years ago. Isla knew her from photographs. "Passive playback," Wren said in her most neutral voice. "An old fragment surfaced through resonance. It isn't addressed to us. Do you want me to cut radio reception?" "No." "Isla, if you cut the radio, I don't hear the storm warnings reflected in the layer. I hear those or I hear nothing." She unclenched her fingers from the stick, one at a time. "Leave it on. They're only voices." "They're only voices," Wren repeated. In that way of hers, that could mean anything. They went down, and the voices came and went, carried on the currents of the sheet below like leaves on a river. A woman dictating a parts inventory, a child singing something off-key and happy at a birthday relayed between stations, A pilot swearing at a customs post, scraps of old music, the hailing tones of ships that no longer existed, a graveyard that never fell silent. Isla let them wash over her, and discovered with a tightening in her chest that they were not frightening. They were worse than that. They were beautiful. They made you want to listen. They made you want to go deeper, where they came in clearer. At 550 kilometers, the wine-dark gloom lit up. "Contact," Wren said. "Multiple. Inbound." Through the viewports, Isla saw them, first as pale glimmers, then closer, then larger, Windjellies. Life forms, if life was the word, discovered a century after colonization and an enigma to this day. Translucent bells of cold plasma, each one as wide as a shuttle, fringed with tassels of bluish light, drifting through the deep tiers of Barrow. They had no mouths, no eyes. They fed on electromagnetic fields. They grazed on lightning. And the Skylark, with her engines, her coils, her electric heart, was the fattest bolt of lightning in the entire tier. 12, Wren counted. 16. 21. They've scented our power bus. Isla, if they latch onto the hull in a shoal, they drain my grid in 4 minutes. I saw it happen on the platform long ago. They aren't malicious, they're only hungry. How long to get under them? You can't get under them. The shoal sinks as we sink. They're better at this than we are. The first Windjelly touched the hull. There was no thud. There was a song. A crystalline glissando sliding through the metal. Every light on the deck flickered at once, and somewhere astern, a relay tripped with a dry crack. Across the viewport, the creature's fringes spread wide, like the fingers of a stroking hand. Isla felt the old fear rising, ready to freeze her hands on the stick. 3 seconds, maybe 4, a lifetime. No, not this time. Think. They feed on fields. They don't hunt ships, they hunt energy, so don't run from them. Feed them somewhere else. Wren, the distress beacons. How many do we carry? 4. Why would you... She paused for a tenth of a second. In Wren, that was the equivalent of a revelation. Bait. Charge their capacitors to bursting. Set them on continuous emission, wide spectrum, as loud as they'll go. You launch 2 to port, 30 degrees deviation, and in the same instant you cut everything we can cut on board. Engines to standby. We free fall on ballast. We make ourselves small, quiet, and uninteresting. Free fall in a 200-knot wind. The ship will shake like a nut in a sack. Nuts reach the bottom hole, Wren. That is not a proverb. 'Tis now. The beacons shot from their tubes like 2 small, furious stars, howling on every frequency, and the shoal of Windjellies turned after them in a single rippling motion, like a flock changing direction. In the same second, Wren cut the bus. The deck plunged into darkness and silence, and the Skylark fell. She fell through the dark wine, rattling, creaking. Isla strapped tight, counting her breaths. The voices of the dead whispering through speakers running on backup power, a parts inventory, an off-key, happy song. And above and behind them, the shoal of blue lights dwindled, clustered around the beacons. Feasting. At 680 kilometers, Wren restarted the engines, one at a time, like a cat entering an unfamiliar room. "Clear," she announced. "We've fed them for a day. Hull at 52 bars, 3 microfractures astern, isolated, not propagating. And now, the bad news." That was the good news. The storm front from Wes's charts. It is no longer where the charts put it. It is here, between us and the wreck. She brought up the projection, a wall of red vortices 80 kilometers thick, grinding over the Theodora's coordinates like a millstone. We can wait it out. Estimate 40 to 60 hours. We don't have them. We don't have them, Wren confirmed. Or we go in through it. Along its base, where the storm scrapes against the layer, there is a shear corridor. The storm can't bite into metallic hydrogen, so beneath it there remains a tongue of calm, perhaps 2 kilometers thick, perhaps 200 meters. My data is 60 years old. Isla stared at the red wall on the projection. Through there, through that corridor Abel had gone down. The telemetry of his final descent, what remained of it, she had read 100 times in the past 4 hours. Depth, velocities, then static, then nothing. Somewhere in that tongue of calm between the millstone and the memory, the cable had come up empty. Isla, Wren said quietly, I can fly this segment. No. Your reaction time is good. Mine is better. And you haven't slept in... That's not why, Wren. Isla put her hands on the stick and was almost surprised to find them steady. If I sit with my hands in my lap and just listen, I'll hear the voices. If I fly, I hear the ship. I need to hear the ship. Wren was silent for a long moment. The roof of the mouth does not fear the storm, she said at last. And what's that one? A real one. From the platform. The pressure divers used to say it before the hard shifts. A pause. I never understood it. Until now. The Skylark dipped her nose and entered the corridor. The shear corridor was a place that had no right to exist. Above, less than a kilometer away, the storm's underside scoured everything at 600 knots, a ceiling of red-black chaos flashing without pause. Discharges the size of cities ignited and died in silence. Below, less than a kilometer away, stretched the layer. Isla was seeing it with her own eyes now, for the first time in 19 years. And the sight stole her breath exactly as it had then. A shoreless sea of mercury, mirror-smooth. The storm ceiling hung reflected in it, upside down, and just beneath the sheen flowed rivers of light. The currents of the sheet, the planet's thoughts, 1,000,000 years of voices circulating through the metallic hydrogen like blood through something alive. And between the hammer and the mirror, through that tongue of impossibly calm air, flew the Skylark. Small, creaking in every joint at 79 bars. Alive. 300 meters of ceiling, Wren murmured. It's holding, wreck at 40 kilometers. Isla, in the corridor, the echo is an arm's length away. The playbacks will be strong. Whatever you hear, remember, the layer is not speaking to you. The layer talks in its sleep. I know what the layer is. I know you know. Wren's voice softened. I'm saying it to you, not to the pilot. The radio cleared like a spring. The voices no longer came in fragments. They came whole, clean, stereophonic, as though the ship were flying through an invisible crowd. A liturgy once broadcast between stations at Christmas, laughter from a canteen, a woman repeating, tenderly and patiently, a name Isla didn't know. And then, 22 kilometers from the wreck, without warning, the radio spoke in the voice of Abel Barrow. And if you've forgotten to eat again, little one, I swear on every moon in this system, I will turn this ship around. Isla's hands did not move on the stick. The rest of her collapsed inward, like a building. She knew the transmission. It was old. From before the Theodora went down, one routine call out of 1,000. She was 17, stuck on the station with the flu. He was away up at the orbital relays. He'd brought her soup in a thermos afterward, and a fridge magnet with a cat on it. The layer had kept the call. The layer kept everything. "Isla," Wren said, "Pulse 140, talk to me." "I'm here." Her voice came out dry but level. "I'm here, it's only playback." "It's only playback," Wren confirmed. And for the first time since she'd known her, it seemed to Isla that the machine was lying to be kind. They flew on. Abel's voice came and went twice more, once laughing, once humming something off-key, and each time Isla held the stick and breathed the way he had taught her, 4 counts in, 6 counts out, and did not freeze. And then, on the Mercury horizon, the Theodora appeared. The wreck was afloat. That was the thing no one had told her in 19 years of nightmares. The cargo ship had not been crushed. She had not sunk. She had settled there, resting on the very face of the layer, buoyed by the immense density of the metallic hydrogen, like a boat on a heavy sea. 300 meters of ship. Dark, furred with phosphorus frost, lying on a mirror that reflected her perfectly. 2 Theodoras joined keel to keel. One real, one made of memory, and Isla could not have sworn which was which. "Our claim went topside 11 hours ago," Wren said softly. "As of this moment, officially, the wreck is ours. Hold 3 is amidships. The breach in the plating will admit the cargo arm. I'm reading the container. The pressure seals are holding. Isla." A pause. "The lattice is alive." Isla brought the Skylark into a hover above the breach and deployed the arm. She worked without haste and without pause, hands on the fine controls, cutting the old cargo straps one by one. Beneath her, the layers' rivers of light flowed under the wreck. Above, the storm ceiling flashed upside down in the mirror. The container, 4 tons, a white sarcophagus, stenciled with the faded marks of a dead shipyard, came free of the hold and rose smoothly toward the belly of the Skylark. The main winch caught it in its claws, and then, exactly then, as though the new weight had pressed down on one of the planet's keys, the layer surged. Not physically. The mirror stayed smooth, but the radio lit up on every frequency at once, and into the cabin poured, whole, untouched, unfragmented, the last call of Abel Barrow, the one from that day, the one the static had torn to shreds 19 years ago, the one Isla had never once heard through to the end. "Halcyon 9, this is Abel. I'm at the wreck. The ceiling is closing. Repeat, the ceiling is closing faster than..." Crackle, wind. "Isla, do you read? Don't pull yet. Do not pull yet. Do you hear me? The cable's fouled around a longeron. If you pull now, you tear out the winch, and without the winch, you never get back up from here yourself." His breathing, heavy, close. The sound of a carabiner. "There, done. I'm off the cable. I'll clear it from the longeron by hand. Give me 1 minute. You hold. Hold, little one. Whatever happens, you hold." Wind. Crackle, and then, faintly, buried under static, but distinct forever. "It's not your fault. Remember that part. If you don't remember the..." Silence. Isla sat in the pilot's seat, above the wreck, the container in the claws, her face wet, while 19 years rearranged themselves inside her with a soundless roar. She hadn't frozen. That is, she had frozen, but her 3 seconds had killed no one. Abel had unclipped himself. To save her, and to save the ship that was her only way home, he had opened his own carabiner. And if she had pulled the lever in time, the way she had cursed herself every night for not doing, she would have hauled up exactly what she hauled up anyway. an empty cable. Isla. Wren's voice was not soft at all now. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. Radar contact. From above. On the projection, descending through the shear corridor in a wedge formation, came 6 red points. Fast, small, uncrewed. Heavy class recovery drones, Wren said. Helique signatures. The Herald has arrived early. Someone aboard read our salvage claim and burned hard for 11 hours. They've come to contest it. Wren let a short pause hang. With plasma cutters. Isla wiped her face with the back of her glove and became, in a single breath, someone else. Or perhaps the same person, made whole. Time to contact. 9 minutes. We can't fight. We carry no weapons, and they carry no crew who might care about pressure. We can't outrun them on the climb. With 4 tons in the claws, we ascend like a boulder. Wren was running scenarios. Isla could almost hear it. I can compute a surrender that leaves us alive. We are not surrendering the lattice. 1,200 people breathe out of that container. She studied the projection, the wedge of drones sinking through the corridor, and above the corridor the millstone of the storm, turning, blind, hungry. We can't outrun them, but they don't want the lattice, Wren. They're executing an order. Recover the claimed cargo. The consortium's machines don't think, they sniff. Sniff what? Signatures. Sealed containers with cargo transponders. Isla twisted in her straps. Our ballast hold. We still have the 2 remaining beacons and the grapple rig off the Theodora. Cargo ships carry emergency beacons by law. The Theodora's locker owes us a 1/3, and the wreck is full of empty containers with transponders that have been dead for 20 years. Wake 3 of them up. Load them with the lattice's cargo codes. You have them from Wes's docking manifest. We lash them to the beacons and we launch them upward through the corridor on 3 different vectors. 6 drones. 3 decoys that all smell like a catalytic lattice, plus us, smelling like a 4th. They'll split. They have to split. It's how they're written. They split into 4 groups, Wren said, which means at least 1 pair still comes after us. And then, Isla said, I take them somewhere algorithms never go. She drew a deep breath. Through the storm's underside. Wren's fans changed pitch twice, like a person opening her mouth and thinking better of it. The lower margin of the Millstone, she said at last. 300 knot shear, across 500 meters of thickness, with 4 tons slung under our belly. If that container starts to pendulum, it tears out the winch, and possibly the keel. Which is why I won't let it pendulum. I deploy the secondary arm and hold it rigid, manually, the whole way through. You fly, I hold. The segment lasts 4 minutes. No one holds 4 tons rigid for 4 minutes in shear. Isla, not even. I won't hold them with my arms, Wren. I'll hold them with my head. The servos supply the force. I only supply the corrections, before they're needed. I anticipate. I've done it all my life on the station winch. She stopped for a moment, and to her own surprise she smiled. I'm winch folk, father to daughter. The drones were 6 minutes out. Wren made no further comment. The grapple tore 3 empty containers out of the wreck, the beacons coupled on. The false codes lit up inside them, like borrowed hearts. And when the drone wedge entered short range, 3 lying stars shot out of the Theodora's shadow on 3 separate vectors, screaming of precious cargo. The wedge shattered. 2 drones after the first star, 2 after the second. one after the third, one after the Skylark. "The smartest one stayed on us," Wren said, banking hard over the mercury mirror. "Or the stupidest. With machines, it's hard to tell." The Skylark raced down the tongue of calm, the container clenched under her belly, the drone on her tail. Gaining, meter by meter. The storm ceiling rushed up to meet them, red-black, flashing. Isla hunched over the console of the secondary arm, both hands on the fine force levers, eyes on the winch telemetry. And in the last moment before entry, she managed to say, "Wren, whatever happens, you hold the ceiling. I hold the weight." "Nuts reach the bottom hole," Wren said, and flew into the Millstone. The world became a fist. The Skylark shook like prey in a set of jaws. The wind struck her from one side, then the other, then from below, without rhythm, without mercy. The casings groaned, a panel astern split with a sound like breaking bone. The alarms all screamed at once, until Wren silenced every one of them but one, and under the belly 4 tons of future wanted to become a pendulum. Isla felt its every intention through the levers, through the telemetry, through the soles of her boots, the lurch to port, half a second before the sensors showed it, the twist, the drop, and she corrected, movements small as a breath, 4 counts in, 6 counts out, the arm rigid, the mind rigid. Whatever happens you hold, little one. Hold. And behind them, the recovery drone entered the shear with all the arrogance of 5 centuries of technological progress and was snatched upward, spun, broken over its own angle of attack, swallowed by the millstone like a spark up a chimney. 3 minutes later, 3 minutes Isla would feel in her shoulders for the rest of her life. The Skylark burst through the crown of the storm into a copper abyss. Calm, vast, the container intact beneath her belly. One sound aboard, the single alarm Wren had left running, which now, deprived of a purpose, fell silent too. "The winch," Isla said hoarse. "Tell me about the winch." "The winch holds," Wren said. "You put a peak load of 98% on it. 2%, Isla. That's all you left between us and 19 more years." A pause. Abel would have left 5. Abel lied to his telemetry. "I know," Wren said. "I was there." The laughter that seized Isla resembled nothing that had come out of her in 19 years. She laughed until her ribs ached, hands still trembling on the levers, climbing up through the tears of wine, of copper, of honey, of milk, while the voices of the echo faded behind them one by one, becoming droning again, becoming carol again, becoming planet again. At the very top, where the sky turned back to clean black, the Herald was waiting. A grey blade, 200 meters long, bearing the consortium's markings. An official voice began, about Helicay's ownership of non-recoverable assets. "This is the tug Skylark," Isla cut in, "for Station Halcyon 9. Carrying cargo salvaged under claim number 1702, logged with the registry relays 19 hours ago. Holding 90 hours priority under Salvor's law. You have the document in front of you. So do I." She smiled, though no one could see it. And in case you're considering a creative interpretation, this entire exchange is transmitting in the clear, and it is being reflected right now in the echo layer. Down there, gentlemen, no word ever dies. 1,000,000 years from now, someone will be able to hear exactly what you choose to say in the next 10 seconds. A long silence followed, on every frequency. Then the Herald came about, ponderous and dignified as any institution caught red-handed, and settled into a holding orbit, from which it did not descend again. The catalytic lattice went into the lung on the 9th day, 31 hours ahead of the deadline, carried on the shoulders of half the station. West Drummond wept without a shred of embarrassment as the reaction chambers lit, one after another, and the oxygen pressure climbed the graph like a sunrise. That evening, for the first time since the lung died, the smell of ripe tomatoes drifted through the ventilation of Halcyon 9, and Sabah Idris wrote in the station register, in her own hand, under status, "Asset, recovered, hours." Isla was missing from the celebration for half an hour. They found her afterward in Dock 4, welding the split panel back onto the Skylark's stern. Visor down. The ship's speakers murmuring something low, something that sounded like an off-key song hummed long ago. "The salvage registry says the Theodora is ours for another 70 hours, Wren said over the hiss of the welding arc. "There are 2 more disassembled lungs, in holds 4 and 5, plus an entire ship's worth of zero-gravity-grown steel. With what we bring up from there, Halcyon 9 doesn't beg the consortium for parts for a generation, but it would mean going down again. Soon. And often." Isla raised her visor. Through the dock viewport, Barrow rolled its burning clouds. Immense. Patient. Remembering everything, every storm, every shipwreck, every voice that had ever said, "Little one, whatever happens, you hold." Somewhere beneath all those layers, the planet was singing. Isla listened to the deep's carol, and noticed, like something new and nameless, that she was no longer afraid of it. "Check the winch and top off the ballast," she said. "We go down at first light." "A good day," said Wren, every fan purring, "shows itself in the morning. That one actually exists." "Isla," said the ship, "from now on they all do." That is where the file ends. One detail remains, for those who like to read the label on the drawer. The frequency this recording arrived on went dark again the moment the story ended. It has carried nothing since, and the layer, if the file itself is to be believed, plays back only what it has already heard. It invents nothing. It only remembers. Which means that somewhere beneath those clouds someone once sat in the dark and told this story out loud, from beginning to end. Every word of it true enough to keep. Was it the pilot herself, grown old? Was it the ship remembering for her? The file does not say. The archive would very much like to know who was listening. The archive is closing for tonight.